Yeah, we go. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. My goodness, we've got a good turnout. We're glad you're here. Some of you I don't know. You may not know me, but I'm Bill Peterson, pastor here at St. Gabriel. And on behalf of the good folks of this congregation, I want to welcome you here to this place. Just a few housekeeping notes as a few more folks look like they're coming in. If you need restrooms, if you've not been in this building before and you need restrooms, they're back behind you in the narthex there, but they're off in that northeast corner there. You'll see men's and women's back in there. We have some water, ice water out there on the counter in the narthex. If you need any water, we have that for you. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you here today. Dr. Dearman is a recognized authority on ancient Israel and on its culture and religion. He's served as a visiting professor at numerous institutions nationally and worldwide. He's authored and edited several books, biblical commentaries, and numerous articles and entries in scholarly resources. He's served on editorial boards, many editorial boards, and has participated in archaeological projects in Jordan and Israel, and served on the governing board of the American Center of Oriental Research in Amman, Jordan. So he's both a biblical scholar, a theologian, biblical languages, as well as an archaeologist. In fact, his interest in archaeology is very important to us, and we're going to be, pardon the pun, digging into that on September the 10th. Andy will be back on September the 10th, Wednesday, September the 10th, and he's going to be looking at ancient pottery for us on that one, which I love pottery, so I'm very interested in that. And then he's going to come back on September 24th, and we'll advertise all these through the same channels that brought you here today. He'll be back on Wednesday, September the 24th, and do a look at ancient glass. So those are two interesting, more archaeologically based times, and I think we'll have a good time with those. We'll get that information out to you again. That's Wednesday, September 10th, 10 a.m. here on pottery, and September 24th, which is a Wednesday, on glass. Andy's going to give a presentation here until about 11, and then we will break. We'll take about a 10 or a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back in for a little finish off before noon. We'll be through by noon. He will be here next week again at the same time for the second half of this History of Iran. He will be here at 10 a.m. next Thursday, the 21st, here in the sanctuary. Welcome. Andy, we welcome you. Thank you for your time and all your expertise and wit and charm and all that.
I'm on now. Okay, you've got the North Carolina accent coming all the way through. Is that right? Good. Thank you for coming out. Bill, thanks for the introduction. I think the best way to get started is to get started. Rather than giving a long explanation of what I hope to do, I'll just do it, and I hope it works. So you're going to see a number of slides of maps and photographs, occasional charts or graphs or things like that. And so I mean this sincerely. I'd be happy to be a disembodied voice as long as you're looking forward. You know, because a lot of your information is there. I'm a visual learner, so that's the way I like to make presentations. Just as a reminder, the title Long and Influential History of Iran, which is true, as you will doubtlessly know and you'll see illustrated today. But just think of how many connections there were between the United States government and Iran until 1979. And it all came to a crashing end. And we've had wars and rumors of wars since then, and Iran has been in the center of a number of things in the Middle East. And so Bill and I thought, let's just do some history here and get some background. I will say this, I'm not a military strategist, and so if you ask me about that, I'll just shake my head and point upwards, because I don't know. but I will give you some background of the region and particularly of Iran. One more kind of introductory comment. There's so many important things about the region and history, and what I will do is inevitably one-sided. Not biased, but one-sided, because it's not about everything in the Middle East, it's primarily about Iran. So I will, for example, next week say almost nothing about the Crusades, because they did not influence the history of Iran. But if you're talking about the history of the Middle East, it's a crime, generally speaking, not to talk about the Crusades. So anyways, it's one-sided in the sense that we're concentrating on Iran and its long and quite impressive history. Everybody with me? Got your seatbelts on? Here we go. Okay, a map. We'll start with Geography 101 and Demographics 101, just for a couple of minutes. And all joking aside, I will be turning my back to you on a number of occasions to point things out. Don't take it personally. It's just, I'm not howdy-doody. I can't spin all the way around. All right, here we go. So you'll see here, it's a flat map, and so it's not cluttered, but it's not darkly printed either. But you'll see right there in the center where it says Iran. And the borders run just like this. They've been essentially in place for not very long in its history, but for a number of decades. And Iran is surrounded by 7 different countries as well as bodies of water. So it's got a quite varied set of neighbors. I'll do it very quickly. So if we just start down here at the bottom, you'll see the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, and the Persian Gulf. Think about everybody's arguing about naming things. Maybe they'll change the name of Persian Gulf someday. Who knows? But it's been called Persian Gulf a long time. If I had to guess, I'd say it'll stay that way. In any case, that's your body of water right there. And then we'll go counterclockwise. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan. Speaking personally, once I get into the stands, I have a hard time finding these if they're not labeled. It's not a part of the geography that I know so well. The word stand goes back a long ways, millennia. In fact, it means place of. So Turkmenistan is the place of the Turkoman, for example. Or Afghanistan, the place of the Afghans. Then here's the Caspian Sea right here, which I think it's the largest inland lake. It's called a sea. I think it's the largest inland lake in the world in terms of its surface. It's not so deep, but it's massive. So you could comfortably fit all of our Great Lakes inside the Caspian Sea, and you'd have some leftover territory. It's quite large. And then you come over here, Azerbaijan and Armenia, then Turkey, and then Iraq. And right down here is the little country of Kuwait, and it's just a few miles, about 50 miles away from the Iranian border. So it's a close neighbor. But that's a lot of neighbors to have. Okay, so topography, friends. Here is Iran, again, right there. There's the Caspian Sea in the Persian Gulf. A sizable range of mountains coming through here. And it would look in many ways like the Rocky Mountains in our own country. So that's a pretty good analogy. And it's cut by a number of valleys. There's another smaller range right here. And then one, it's a little difficult to see right here, called the Alborz Mountains. Very high, and then it runs down towards the Caspian Sea. Now, they've got some high mountains. The highest peak, which is right back over here, is 18,000 plus. So as my grandmother would say, that's up there. They got Colorado beat. And they have several of the 14 and 15,000 range mountains. And then they've got some arid and semi-arid regions right here that go by the term desert for good reason, high plains. So here is the shape of the country right here. Is it okay if I just do this side, or is it okay for you over there? Thank you. So you will, excuse me, friends, you will remember back in the spring of 1980, we had an ill-fated attempt to rescue the hostages. Nod your head, friends. You all will remember that. You may recall they took off from a carrier base right here, and they landed in a desert region, and they're going to set up a camp there, then try to get closer to Tehran to rescue our hostages. Please nod your head. Thank you, thank you. And so this is where they landed, right in there. You got a big desert area here and a big desert area right there, and they landed right there to try to go about another almost 300 miles up to Tehran. And you remember it was a disaster. Okay, there are 31 provinces, what you and I would call a state, in Iran. Again, we're doing the thumbnail of demographics here. 90 plus million inhabitants. Well, it's good size. Iran is in size, about 2.5 times the size of Texas. It's a pretty good size. It's the 17th largest country, geography-wise, in the world, and it has, correspondingly the 17th largest population at 90 million plus. And like most censuses, it's approximate. We have a discussion in our country about illegal immigrants coming in, undocumented peoples, and so forth. Tehran, the capital city, has made some decisions recently, and in this first, what are we now, about the first 8 months or so of the year, they have expelled over 1 million Afghans. That's a big undocumented or unofficial population group there. There are approximately, out of 90 million in the population, 4 million refugees from Afghanistan living in Iran. Big influential population. By the way, as you know, Iran is a large oil-producing and gas-producing country. I don't know much about that industry, but I can show you on the map where much of that takes place. It's right here in this corner is where oil was discovered in 1907. And some of you who are in that industry may well know the statistics, but in terms of proven reserves, particularly of gas, Iran is way up there in terms of its assets. Okay, breakdown here. When you think ethnic groups, friends, don't think in terms of race, think more of language and culture. So the blue color says Persian. You'll also know the name Farsi, which is it's the same word from a different direction. And so about 60% of the inhabitants of Iran speak Farsi and consider themselves of Persian heritage. They've got a couple of large minority pools. Names some of you will recognize. Let's take this one right here, what many of you will recognize, the Kurds. So I'm not sure we're tracking. Most of you have heard that name Kurd, right, friends? They're in the news quite a bit. They have their own language base and history. There are about 20 million of them who are spread out over 3 or 4 countries in the Middle East. And so about 1 in 10 persons who lives in Iran today is Kurdish, which means they're going to be at least bilingual. They will speak a form of a Kurdish language and probably Farsi as well. And down here, just as an illustration, the Azeris, that's the same group, the tribal group of long ago, which now is primary in the country next door called Azerbaijan. It's again built on that same name. So 25% of the population are those two ethnic groups. There are several others, but we won't go over them. All right, here's one. The headline, to be official, this is the official religion decreed by the Constitution of the modern state of Iran, and it's called Twelver Jafri Shia Islam. We'll just call it Shia Islam or Shia Islam, and that'll be our shorthand, okay, friends? Will that work okay? But it is 12er because there are also 7ers, and there are some other versions who follow this general pattern. It's a very important history and distinction. I'll try to say a few things about it later, but just know for now, this breakdown shows that 90% of the population is reputed to be Shiite Islam. that's an interesting discussion now in terms of polls and how reliable they are. But this is quite often what you'll see if you run a search. What is the major religion of Iran? This is the kind of thing that will pop up to you. Then up here it says 9% Sunni Muslim and other sects. So that means the very vast majority of the country is some form of Islam. And so by the end of today, we will have come to the Muslim birth and expansion, and we'll talk about that a good bit next week as we get into the 20th century. So I will cover parts of that for you, but just know now that this is a particular marking point in the history of the world and Islam. Iran would pride itself on being the largest Shiite Muslim country in the world, which is true. Okay, now, what are we going to do for the rest of the morning? Everybody ready? You know, I've been told when you make presentations, don't read to them. So I'm going to talk to you, and you can read in the background. We all have to have some short term vocabulary that helps us put several movements or things together. So if you talk about the Civil War or the Industrial Revolution, it includes a lot of things. We just have to kind of nod our head. Same thing here. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the Persian Empire. It'll be known to many of you quite a number of things about it. You'll see the dates there. And famous kings, you will have learned it sometime in the past. Cyrus the Great. You're going to hear a lot of references to the Great today because there were a lot of people who claimed that title, about Alex the Great and Herod the Great and so forth. Darius or Darius the First and Xerxes. Those are names that you will know. I'll come back over them in a moment. The empire initiated by Alexander the Great. I'll show you a couple of maps to show how it relates to the Middle East and to Persia. And that's known in shorthand as the Hellenistic Empire. And then one, it's just a name to know today. You can forget it and have a happy lunch. It's called the Parthian Empire, and it goes back to a segment of Iran from the Parthian tribal area. But for a while, they were controlling a good bit of the Middle East. Another one called the Sasanian Empire, very important for this history. Again, you don't have to remember it past lunch, but for today, I'll show you some maps and how it fits in to a larger history. And then the arrival of Islam. So we're on the move through a few centuries. Everybody ready? I don't think I said the two terms that you saw in the headlines, Iran and Persia. They're both old terms, and if you were to ask somebody who lived in that region 1,000 years ago, where are you from? He or she might say, I'm one of the Aryan people. And Aryan and Iran are essentially the same word. And in a kind of twisted scientific way, what we think of as the term we have heard in English, Aryan people. Remember that discussion in Germany? It's the same word. But it was their self-designation of people who lived there, and Persia was a word that came from one of the provinces called Pars, P-A-R-S. And so if you're referring to some part of it, it was Iran or the Iranian people, and sometimes it was the Persians from Pars. And so they went back and forth, and Persia was the term that people in the Western languages used until 1935, when the ruler of Iran said, can we start using the term officially Iran? Everybody said, okay. Wasn't a big fight about it, but that's how it changed. That simple. Okay, the Persian Empire. You know I need drum beat. So as you look at the map here, your heading helps set the context for you in terms of geography. The ancient Near East, 540 BC. So it's labeled here the Persian Empire, and it was initiated by Cyrus the Great, and he was from the area of Pars, P-A-R-S, right down here. And one of the cities that he set up for himself as he gained momentum and territory and influence is right here. It's a mouthful. It's called Parsargadae, right there. And then about 30 miles away, one of his successors, Darius, who we'll look at in a moment, and I'll show you some pictures of the ruins there in just a moment, thought, you got to have another capital city. I mean, one's not enough. So he built a massive showcase palace with administrative buildings all around, and it took on the name from the Greek language, Persepolis, the city of the Persians. And so it's right here, Ekbatana, and that it's misspelled there. Somebody made a mistake on the map. Right here's an old one from the Medes. You may have heard the term the Medes and the Persians. There are the Parthians. I'll talk about this as their headquarters right there. There was a great empire that was coming to its end, though it didn't know it at the time, called the Babylonian Empire. Okay, friends, time to show your hands. Nebuchadnezzar the Great. Raise your hand if you, yeah. You've all heard of Nebuchadnezzar the Great. So here's Babylon right here. And Cyrus walked into Babylon, hardly fired a shot, as they say in military terms, and took over. And that meant that this area which he had started with, and he had marched all the way out here through Asia Minor, today Turkey, to this very wealthy area called Lydia. So this was his first initial gathering of power, and then he takes over right here, and so he has what was known in the ancient world as the Fertile Crescent, and then his son is going to take over Egypt, and so it won't be long before the Persian Empire has, you ready, 2 million plus square miles of territory. My grandmother would say that's a chunk of land. 2 million plus. Now this statistic, who knows how accurate it is, but you'll find people a lot smarter than we are will say somewhere north of 40% of all the world's population was under the thumb of the Persian Empire. A lot of folks. Okay, one of the things that Cyrus did when he took over in Babylon, since a number of people had been subsumed by the Babylonians, he declared that a number of them would have the opportunity to go back to their homelands because so many of them had been exiled. You remember the famous account from biblical history, some of you will know well, called the Babylonian exile, where the area in the eastern Mediterranean had all been, not all, but many of the people had been taken away and forced to settle over in Babylon. And so he wrote something, one of the most important documents in ancient literature, many of you will know it, it's called the Cyrus Cylinder, which he published. You can read about a number of things there on the points. It was discovered in 1879 because the British were in the area. Remember, the sun never sets on the British Empire, right? They were there and they were digging around and they found this, had it translated, and which he allowed a number of people to go back. He did not mention the Jews, but there are a number of references in the Old Testament, as you'll see down here, where Cyrus allowed them to go back and rebuild Jerusalem and so forth. Anyway, this is one of the prized possessions in the British Museum today. Okay, this is the way Darius the First, those are his dates of rule right there. Cyrus died in 530, so just a few years later. And this is the way he represents himself in his capital city. If I showed you a larger form of it, you would just nod, you say, yeah, he's on a throne. Got to be on a throne. And he had quite a number of sources of revenue. Could I put it that way? I think that's a generic way of putting it. Several sources of revenue. And so at his capital in Ekbatana, they did some excavations there, and for his fine china, they had all gold. They weren't baking anything in the oven, they had gold. And so this is one of his wine goblets. Right here, solid gold. When Cyrus the Great moved to the west and took over the territory called Lydia, in that western part of Asia Minor, they had a number of gold and silver mines, and the king there, Some of you may know his name was Croesus. There used to be a proverb a couple generations ago, so-and-so was rich as Croesus. You everybody heard that one? It's okay. You can still make it home. It's okay. But I heard that one as a kid growing up. So-and-so was rich as Croesus. And so when Cyrus took over and had such this large empire, they developed ways not just of measuring and trading gold and silver, which had been around for a long time, but making coins. And so the origin of coinage started over in Lydia, and then it was brought into being in a large way by the Persian Empire. It's one of its great gifts to civilization. So here's an early coin. If any of you like to collect coins, I know you're drooling right now. I know you are. So this is a very early example of a coin. So there's no label here. We don't know which of the monarchs it is, but it could be Darius. It could be Xerxes, his successor. And they didn't bother on doing anything on the backside. So this is what's called by the coin collectors the obverse, and this is the reverse. And they didn't do anything with it. But it won't take long. They'll start putting their stamp on both sides. But here's one of the earliest examples of coinage. If you take it and have it tested by the smart people, they weren't cheating. It's like 99 point something gold. Nobody was cutting corners when it came to doing these kind of coins. Okay, just a few pictures to get an idea of this is part of the history of Iran. Off and on for years, you'd have European and then local teams digging in Persepolis, the area of Persepolis, and so they got the wall lines here all laid out, cleaned away, and so forth. So a picture here from the drone, you get an idea of the size. This is what was known as the ceremonial or reception capital. So when people brought gifts in tribute, this is where they were typically received. And so that's quite a palace for 2,500 years ago. What I often say to students is this, I kind of wonder, when I look at this picture, what were my ancestors doing 2,500 years ago? I bet you they were in a hut, riding a donkey or something. I mean, this was quite a development in human culture. All right, here is the reception area proper. Probably had some vibrant colors associated with it, which have worn away. A lot of this has had to be reconstructed because Alexander the Great came in and he was unhappy. He destroyed a good bit of it. More about that in a moment. But you get some idea of what the reception palace looked like. The stairway going up. Got to have plenty of ways to get up if you're carrying things like gold and silver and wine and jewelry and things like that. Here's one of the gates. If you're trying to figure out in terms of size, you can see some people here in the background. Give you some idea. This is called the horse gate. You can see the people there, excuse me, in the background. So one of the things that they did for artwork, decoration, they would do various colors and painting and frescoes, but they also became quite adept at what I would call enamel work. So they had enamel bricks. They weren't the first people to do that. The Babylonians did it, but they had a real art form of it. And there were some pieces of it that had survived in the destructions and the overlay over the years. And so when the French were there digging some decades ago, they discovered some pieces intact, and they have, how shall I put it? They took them, first thing, put them in the Louvre, and now you can see them. So here you'll see some of the elite soldiers of the Persian Guard right here. Great detail, beautiful artwork. Perhaps some of you have seen that in the Louvre. It's one of their prized collections. Okay, just as an idea, what was it like? Here's what an archaeological architect, tough word to say, an archaeological architect thinks the ceremonial capital looked like. Quite some reception area, wouldn't you say? Let me just go back here for a moment. what you will see in smaller detail, all these people as if they were going up the steps. So it's shall I put this? I think this is fair the way to put it. It's also propaganda. Because if you were bringing in tribute and you're going up the stairs, you're watching people carved in stone on the side doing the same thing, as if this is what everybody does. You bring tribute to the great king. And of course, in the inscriptions there, Darius describes himself as a phrase you will all recognize. A lot of folks have used it: King of Kings. Okay, I want to move forward in history for a moment. You'll recognize the picture on the left, right, friends? That's shorthand, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was his name. And that's Empress Farah on, as we look at it, to the left. He ruled for over 30 years, and he was a keen student of history. I'll have more to say about this next week and its influence on the current state of Iran. But in October of 1971, he had a massive, and I think that's understating it, he had a massive, over-the-top, opulent celebration of 2,500 years of monarchy, of which he understood himself to be the culmination. Full stop. So he asked people from all over the world to come. He and President Nixon were pretty good friends, but President Nixon did not come, but he sent the vice president, Spiro T. Agnew. Remember him? So he was there, and they had 2 days, and they went to Persepolis and Parsardagai. The two capitals were not very far apart. They got ferried back and forth with helicopters and things like that. And he had period piece parades going all the way back to the Persians and down through the 2,500 years, which we're summarizing a little bit at a time. Camels, horses, all in different kind of dress, just over-the-top celebration. So the photograph that you see on your right as you're looking at it, right here, is part of Parsardagai, and that is the tomb of Cyrus the Great. And so they're laying a wreath there. There's a good black and white picture of it right there. And then here is it's an older photograph right here, but you recognize Persepolis and the reception palace in the background. Friends, you can see that. Please nod your head so I know I'm on track. Thank you. And I forget which period this is, but they had the red fez for their outfits, their military outfits, and they're riding the camels, and they had one parade after another going down through the various dynasties and so forth of 2,500 years. I'd need several bottles of water to get through that, I tell you. Okay, so here's the official logo. And again, the reason to spend a few minutes of time with you on this is how it influenced the history of Iran and what a sharp reaction the Iranian Revolution of 1979 had against this form of understanding of history. Because, as you know, rightly or wrongly, and I won't debate the subject, even if you want to, I won't, a number of the people thought of the Shah of Iran as a despot. And they were unhappy with a number of things that went on there, and so they had quite a reaction in the Islamic Revolution. But here you will see the official logo of that celebration in October 1971, and they used the Cyrus cylinder here as their logo. Now remember, this is in the British Museum. And in his speech, the Shah of Iran described what he was up to and so forth, that he was the heir and the people were the heir of this great history, and that the Cyrus cylinder was the first charter of human rights. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But having said that, you get some idea of how he tried to build on an illustrious history and to make it part of a wider way of being active and influential in the world. Okay, so he decided that if Darius the Great built something, that he should do something. So for that same celebration, he built an entry gate on the western side of Tehran. This is out of marble. Guess what he called it? Get one guess. The Shah Tower. I mean, what else could you call it? And I won't make any jokes about towers. The Shah Tower. So it got renamed in 1979 the Freedom Tower. So it's a very important landmark there in Tehran, a city of a good 10 million people. And that's what it looks like with the Iranian flag colors when it's lit up at night. Okay, now you won't be able to see all of the details on this map, but let me just go over its contours with you quickly without trying to be too pedantic. So right here is the core. It goes in this direction. Remember, this is Turkey today, Asia Minor. They managed to get troops and control into southeastern Europe right there, what you and I will know today as the Balkans. And this area right in here, a number of what we call today Greek islands, and there were Greek settlements scattered here on this western side. And so a number of the people in here, both native and Greek, were unhappy with Persian control. And one more quote from my grandmother, because you'll hear it several times in the next couple of weeks if you're here. My grandmother would sometimes say, "They just get to fighting. They just get to fighting." And guess what happened? They got to fighting. And so there were several rebellions against Persian control over here, and the Greek city-states, at least some of them, supported it. And so you're going to see one of the great turnarounds in history where eventually Alexander the Great will come and take over all of the Persian Empire. That's where we're going for the next few minutes. Everybody with me? Okay, so there were struggles between the Greek city-states and Persia. Again, I won't read this to you. I mentioned a couple of things to you. That, by the way, is the Parthenon and the Acropolis in Athens that you'll see there in that small photograph on the side. One of the photographs most everybody will recognize. I'm sure some of you have been there. Let's go down to that last bullet point right there. There was a land battle. Many of you will know the name. In fact, all of you will know the name. Marathon. The running of the marathon. And that's in 490. Athens will later be sacked. There'll be a land battle at Thermopylae and Plataea and a naval battle at Salamis in the years 480 and 479. I'm going to show you just a couple of maps and so forth. So what happens, it's your classic overreach. The Persians just kept going west, and finally they found somebody who was just too stubborn to put up with it. So here we go. Here is the western part of Turkey today, Asia Minor. And so up here in this corner is called Macedonia. And that became a kind of tributary early on in Europe to the Persians. And here are various Greek city-states. Remember, Greece is a geographic term, but there was no country of Greek. There were Greek city-states. I think many of you will know that. And so the ones here in purple were those who were most, they were the most obstinate in refusing to deal with the Persians, and indeed were supporting the rebels against them on the eastern islands. And these in the middle, it's a classic issue, friends. We've all seen it many times in world history. They're trying to remain neutral. They've already given in, and they're saying no. Well, that's a recipe for what my grandmother said. They got to fighting. So the Persians sailed in this way. This is with Darius, and they landed right here about 26 miles approximately from Athens, which is right there, and they had the famous battle. You will all know the story, and you probably also know that it's apocryphal. that after the battle, when the Persians, landmass fighters, had been halted, and Darius was trying to decide what to do next, the story is that somebody who was really fast ran 26 miles to tell them in Athens what had happened. He even has a name, Philippides. Well, sorry. Great story. Anyway, there were a couple of runners who went elsewhere to give the news, but it was not the person who ran and then said, "We won," and then dropped over dead. That's the story. But in any case, they were halted there at the place called Marathon, and the stories behind it have given rise, as you know, to this account of the runner. Now we have marathons. My daughter-in-law runs in marathons. They have them in the Olympics. All that's based on this story. Well, the Persians decided that they had to pull back for the moment. There were other things on the other side. We'll skip the details. Darius will not get back, but his son Xerxes, let's quote my grandmother, they're getting ready to fight. So he comes with a massive, well, here's Xerxes right here. It's kind of faded, but this is the way he depicted himself there at Persepolis. He's on the throne. Somebody else is approaching him. That's the way they like to be depicted. So here on this map, here you'll see Greece. So they came in overland like this. They had some ships right here, they being the Persians. Everybody with me? We're talking about thousands and tens of thousands. This was a massive invasion, years in the making. You can imagine the supply lines, how long they were. Military people, lots of books and articles on this and the strategy. So in any case, the naval forces of the Persians were coming this way. Remember, Athens down here, and they got caught in a storm, and a lot of their ships got wrecked. But they landed a lot of people on ground, and they're coming this way towards Athens. And there's a kind of narrowing of a pass right here. Many of you will know this story, at a place called Thermopylae. Gates of warm water. And so the Greek army at least had some people up here to try to stop them while they were trying to arrange some more expansive support. You will all know this story. It's in the Greek sources. It's part of classical history. And so for some time, a smaller force of Greeks withstood the Persian advance. They were eventually betrayed, as the story goes, so that some of the Persians could get around behind them in a small mountain pass. And so when the leading general there, his name was Leonidas, found out that they were going to get surrounded and they were going to die, to put it bluntly, he sent as many as he could down the road before the trap was officially sprung on them. And as the story goes, there were just a few hundred left. How many of you heard the term the 300 Spartans? Okay. So they did get there. They were offered the chance to surrender, and they declined. And so they did fight to the death, and that seems to be historically what happened. So if you go today, as some of you I'm sure have done, so here is the actual battlefield at Greece. I see you nodding your head. Maybe you've been there. This is a statue of Leonidas right there. And there's an inscription right here. It's two words in Greek, molin labe. And you will know it from, the back of a lot of Texas pickup trucks. Come and take it. Now, let's tell the truth. How many of you have seen a giant Texas pickup truck that has a sign on the back? Sometimes it has a can that says, "Come and take it." All right. Yeah. It goes back, this was part of the lore of the story, that when the Persians said, surrender, Leonidas said, "Well, come and take it." And they did. Killed them all. Across the street is one of the most famous epitaphs in all of world history. And this does have good claim to historical accuracy, that they buried the remains of the people there, and they established a monument there with an inscription on it. And this is what it says: "Go tell the Spartans, comma, you stranger who passes by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." A very famous poet. Chip? Simonides of Chios is the reputed author of that, but it's quoted in all the sources down through the century. It was done within just a few years of the actual battle. I don't know how many movies they've made of the Battle at Thermopylae, and I can name at least two off the top of my head. And famous movie called "Go Tell the Spartans," not about this, but using this epitaph. Anybody ever seen it? It's kind of a cult classic. One of Burt Lancaster's last movies, 1978. "Go Tell the Spartans." It's a story of the Vietnam War. They're using the quote that here we lie. Okay, so Persia and the books of Esther and Ezra and Nehemiah, I'll put this in just as a reminder that the Old Testament is part of the literature of this region, and there are a number of connections with Persia. The ancient city of Susa was the home of Esther and Mordecai, and the book we know of as Esther. Some of you will know that our Jewish friends have an annual celebration called Purim, and it celebrates the delivery of, or the deliverance, I should say, of the Jewish community there in Susa and in Persia. Then a book called Ezra, who was a priest in Babylon, but controlled by the Persians, who was allowed to go back and help rebuild Jerusalem, and also Nehemiah. So a number of connections there. Now, the Persian Empire during the time, the subtitle says during the time of Esther, just as a reminder that when they were unable, let's go back here, when they were unable to take the mainland of Greece here, they still control a lot of territory. Just to give you an idea of that 2 million square miles, friends, here's a good way to kind of visualize that. It's not the largest empire in all the world history, but quite a large one for the time, the largest of its day. So it's up here again, up into Europe. All of what we think of as the Middle East right here, Egypt, up into this area right here, all the way up. This is the Indus River right here, so that'd be Pakistan. There's Afghanistan would be right there. Give you some idea of the size and complexity of the empire. Classical sculpture. A couple of ways of representing Alexander the Great. Here on the left was one example of his representation. He may have looked like that, who knows. Here is a mosaic depicting him in battle against the Persians. This is a floor scene. It's quite large. This is the way they depicted Alexander right here. And what I titled there, Greek Revenge. So a number of things had to transpire before Alexander would be able to gather enough cohesion among the Greek city-states to take their revenge and attack the Persians. But that's what's going to happen. So let's remind ourselves of the dates. He was born 356, and he died 323. As many of you I know have often heard, he took off as a young man, took over much of the known world, and he died without a will at age 32. At age 32. Imagine that. So you know what's coming next. If you control a lot of the world and you die intestate, who gets the stuff? And I'm not joking. Who gets the stuff? All the land and everything. So it was quite an issue. Let's remind ourselves of how this is a real pattern, get repeated several times. So, start over here on the left-hand side. This area right here, Pella was the home, the capital there up in northern Greece of Macedonia. So he's got things in control, he being Alexander. I'm skipping over a lot of important stuff, I realize, but if we want to figure out about Iran, this is the quick way to do it. He gets everything ready, and he has his forces, and he starts right over here, and he crosses from Europe over into Asia here, since this is considered Asia. And he has a battle right here and beats the Persian forces. They retreat. He's going to come down like this, and he's going to see some important places. He's going to have another battle right here at a place called Issus, right there. He's going to come down right here. He's going to see that rich city called Tyre of the Phoenicians, big trading, and he wants the place, but they don't want to give in, so he has to lay siege to it. That takes a little while. Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Tyre for 13 years and finally broke his pencil and went home. I guess I'm not going to get it after all. Alexander the Great took it in just a few months. And then he came down this way, and he went to what became one of his favorite cities. It's amazing how things pop up in world history, isn't it? Gaza. Alexander the Great loved Gaza because it was a great trading center. Quick story about him, just to give an illustration of how these things get connected. When he was going to one of the temples one day to worship, and they were burning incense, and he was kind of extravagant and throwing the incense around and so forth. One of his teachers said, Alex, that stuff is really expensive. Kind of go easy on it. And so Alex, of course, remember he's a prince. He was a little peeved by that. So when he took over Gaza, Gaza was one of the great trading places where the incense came up here in trade. So when he took over Gaza, remember who gets the stuff? He does. So he got about 10 tons of incense and sent it back to his teacher. That's Alex for you. All right, so he keeps going like this, up and around. They have a third and decisive battle right here. Then he comes to Babylon. Alex was a great student of history. He wanted to go to Babylon. He was a great student of Egypt, so he wanted to go down there too, and he does. And then he goes up right here to take over. He's systematically going through the Persian Empire and taking it over. He's going to marry one of the Persian princes. He's going to go to Persepolis, the ceremonial capital. And remember, they burned Athens, so what did Alexander do? Yeah, he burned Persepolis. Remember my grandmother. Then he goes up like this, goes around up into the area of Turkmenistan, Afghanistan. They have one more huge fight over here, upper reaches of the Indus River, in what is today Pakistan. They come down through here. He's been gone 10 years. Even an emperor and a general has to listen to the troops. Enough of them said, "We want to go home." So he said, okay. He wanted to keep going because he knew this might be the edge of the Persian Empire, but there's a lot of stuff if you keep going east. Right? A lot of stuff. They came down through here. It was too dry. They were tired. It was a disorganized return. He goes back over here to Babylon to celebrate one more time. He doesn't feel good. He gets sick and dies. Just short of his 33rd birthday. Controls the world, no will. What do you do? I'm going to do a couple more, and then we'll take a break. So Alexander's realm, that massive takeover of the Persian Empire, was known collectively as the Hellenistic Empire. Hellas is another name for Greece. So, one of the generals who assisted in this great campaign, one of the greatest campaigns in all of world history, that 10 years, was given Egypt, and I call it Palestine, but you could call it the Eastern Mediterranean. It went up into what is today Lebanon as well. And so you had what was called the Ptolemaic Kingdom. Just file that one away. Another general's name was Seleucus. He was given essentially the rest of the Persian holdings. That would be Syria, Mesopotamia, and what's today Iran, and so forth. Massive amount of territory. And several factors will lead to the decline and the demise of this Hellenistic empire. And so you're going to see some changes that still reverberate in world history. And two of those are going to be a successor to the Hellenistic empire or to the imperialistic ambitions from the West, the Romans. And a renewed emphasis from Persia, this time called the Parthians. And they're going to start butting heads. Okay, so the division of Alexander's empire, just take that as an approximate date. We're going to take a break here in just 1 second. Here was the area that went to one general, Ptolemy. You'll know that name, many of you who, if you love Cleopatra. Remember, wasn't her brother and husband, he was like Ptolemy the 13th, still around a long time ago. So this is the Ptolemaic Empire, and here was the Seleucid Empire. See, that was essentially the remnants of the, or at least the core of the Persian Empire, all of which had fallen into Alexander's hands, and it goes into the Seleucids. And then some others got this territory back in here. So these two massive areas right here in 275. I know what you want. A break. Come back in 10 minutes, please. You do?
He has something, a call he's expecting, and is I eat this stuff up with this.
Well, you know, it'll be on the website.
Okay. I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
What about the Gordian knot?
Alexander
That
wrote
wasn't a big deal.
It wasn't a big deal, but it's big in literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was right along the route there, but I did not point it out. That's true.
Just one thing I was going to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Here next week.
Clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Between going on a tour and then doing my own research, and they're probably both wrong. Did Alexander burn the library that is now the new Alexandria
No,
Library?
he did not.
Well, that's what the tour guide told me that. But last night I read the opposite. So.
Alex did not burn it.
Okay. It fell because of other things going on.
Yeah, much later. In fact, Alexandria was not that big it was a port and important, but it was not that big until Alexander took it over and it took his name.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no library there during his own day.
Why he, then one thing that's how he got in place.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The destruction of the library is going to be decades later, somewhere like 600 AD, centuries after
Have
this.
you seen the new one?
I have not seen the new one.
Fascinating.
I've heard that.
Yeah, it's a whole, this big dome, and all the languages of the world are etched into it around the side. And the inside, they have done everything they say that you can do to keep it from burning. It's very fire protected, but it is interesting.
Yeah, my son was
If y'all want to come back in, and we'll get going here.
He used
Pretty
to give
quickly.
me all this stuff and talk to me and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating.
While we're gathering, I did a shortcut on Andy. Some of you may not know Andy's background. I did a shortcut when I introduced him to some of what he's been involved with in recent years, but his background is...
Not much evidence of it. Okay, friends, let's see. Here's the division of Alexander's empire, and that's an approximate date. And what I want you to do is just, if you're colorblind, and I'm not joking, I apologize. If you'll just follow the colors, this is the main thing on this map. As you look at all of that green right there, that's essentially the Persian Empire. And it was taken over by Alexander and given to one of the generals whose name was Seleucus, and it became the Seleucid Empire. And what's going to happen in the next several centuries, because I want you to get the big picture, that's the important thing, not all the details. The details I just illustrate with the map. What's going to happen is your classic shrink is going to start. It'll start going this way, and people over here will start reasserting themselves, and Persia will be in the forefront of that reassertion. And so it'll start, the medical term atrophy. That's what's going to happen. And because, I'm going to quote my grandmother, somebody going to get to fighting. And the people over here who are on this little boot area right there of Italy, once they get to take care of the Carthaginians, remember the Rome-Carthage wars? We won't have much time to talk about it. Then they're going to say, there's lots of stuff to the east. Lots of stuff. And they're going to start going in, and you'll see the bigger pattern. These east-west confrontations have been going as long as people have been around. Okay, here we go. The emergence of Rome and Parthia. And I just did an approximate 125. So the great city of Carthage was right here, North Africa. There were wars between the expanding power of the city of Rome and what was called the Roman Empire, or as it would develop into an empire. And once that's taken care of, so this will be the way it starts, they're going to start going in this direction right here. Now, let's go back one more time, friends. See all that green right here? It's gone. The green over here is the Parthians from right there in the center of Iran who have reasserted themselves. The Greek overlords have had to pull back. So you've got the Greeks still down here. You've got an area right here which is sort of semi-free, and this is the area of Rome as it expands. And so virtually all that's left of the Greek Empire is this part right here. This is the Seleucid Empire, and here is the Ptolemaic right here. And so Rome is all the way over here to the Atlantic, and it's going to start going in this direction, and it's going to start taking over things. You recognize the pattern, don't you, friends? From now on, that's the pattern. Some folks fight from the left, some folks fight from the right, and my grandmother will be right every time. They'll get to fighting. So let's just start with that third bullet point right there. Rome and Parthia, an extension of the old Persian Empire, they'll have one of these kind of slow boil. It'll go over, then it'll go back to slow boil, then it'll go over, and my grandmother will be right again. 250 years. And to skip ahead, which I'll show you in a few minutes, the successor to the Parthians over here, the Sasanians, they'll fight against Rome and its successors, the Byzantines, for 400 years. So for 650 years, The folks from the west and the folks from the east are going to be duking it out. They'll get to fighting off and on, setting a pattern that we still see forms of today. That's the big picture. Okay? Okay, the Parthian Empire. This is a different scale on the map. So there's the Caspian Sea right there and the Persian Gulf. And here is Susa right here. Here is the Euphrates River and the Tigris River, and today that is Syria and Iraq. So Babylon's right there, and there's a new capital city that the Parthians will start called Tisiphon. It has a C on the front of it. It's called Tisiphon. And it will be a ceremonial capital for the Parthians and then their successors. It'll be destroyed several times. But here's what I regard as a salient fact. When you think about Iran and Iraq today, there'll be centuries when they were essentially one country. And the division between Iraq and Persia today, and there's going to be an Iraq-Persia or Iraq-Iran war, as you know, the 1980s, is a result of all kinds of divisions. But off and on, they were part of the same country. So when you think about what was a capital city of some of these Persian empires, it was in Iraq today. What is Iraq today? And, I can't contain myself, sorry. We'll be talking more about this the end of today and then next week. The majority population of the modern country of Iraq is Shiite. They've not had a Shiite ruler in a while. Remember, Saddam Hussein was a militant Sunni in some senses of that term. But lots of connections between Iraq and Iran, historically. Okay, the Parthian Empire, all right. Now, Chris, I put this slide up for you, my friend, right here. So as the Romans expand, it's almost inexorable, or it seems that way. Just keep going. If it's an ink blot, it just keeps growing. Here it is right here. They're going in this direction right here. Here is the Parthians right here. Well, they have some internal struggles. You will all know Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Pompey, all of that. I can't summarize it for you, but part of the discussion is Rome developed. This is their Eastern Empire. And remember my phrase, and it's not a throwaway line. There's lots of stuff over there. And so the Romans are trying to decide, since they know the world will be better if they run it. Right? It's a given, they would say. We'll bring stability and order. So the Parthians are over here, and they don't agree with that. So that's where the struggles take place, and the borders will change back and forth. But the richest man in Rome, you'll know his name probably from history, Crassus. Remember that name? You don't? Okay. You'll still have a great lunch. Crassus is his name. And he was made the governor of this new area over here because they thought he could do some conquest and make some more money. So he fought against the Parthians and lost. So this area right here is the border area, and the point, Chris, for you to see this is the Parthians and their lackeys are right along here, and as you know, they were able to install the high priest there in Jerusalem, and the Romans weren't quite sure what to do, and I'm going to make a two-sentence summary, and I'll just let it go. The Romans weren't quite sure what to do on this frontier, so they had made a deal with a local family, and a young member of that family had shown himself with some abilities at fighting. Real young man, early 20s, and the Parthians, did I hit the bad button? I apologize. I got so excited showing Chris this picture, and I squeezed too hard, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, it's Chris's fault. Anyway, so the Romans trying to decide what we're going to do to hold our frontier till we get reorganized. This fellow's name was Herod. And as Chris will tell you, he took a real quick trip over to Rome, not sure what was going to happen. And the Senate took a vote and made him the new king of Judea. And as Chris will say, they said to him, come have dinner, and now that you're king, I hope you can hold it. He would have been a client king. But here is, in other words, the frontier will change. It's not fixed. Okay, now I'm simply skipping ahead because I want to keep our eye on the ball from over here. You won't be able to read it, but that says Parthian Empire. So that's the Persian holdings. This is the greatest extent of the Roman Empire. Right here. The emperor's name is Trajan, a name many of you will know, and he'll be succeeded by another well-known leader. His name was Hadrian. And so there's a lot of work over here. But look, from Britain to the Persian Gulf. Now that's the empire, in the ancient world especially. And so here is the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers coming in right here. And the Persians, or the Parthians, got pushed back, but they didn't give in. And eventually, you remember the old medical term I used earlier, atrophy? It's going to happen pretty soon. These areas, they'll start pulling back right here. They can't control it. And then the borders will be somewhere in here, depending on whether the fight is hot or cold. Okay, so the Parthians are succeeded by another tribal family. This is the name that we have in English. You don't have to remember it. Just use it as shorthand. They're called the Sasanians or the Sassanids. You see both ways. But this is a real high point in the history of Iran, and it's worth a few minutes of our time. I'll try not to be pedantic. This slide here that you see shows you something of their cultural work. That's gold and silver, and the metallurgists, the smart people, they just gush over the kind of chemical formula that they use to lacquer and paint. I think it has some arsenic in it and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, this will give you some idea of their what shall I call it, fine china or whatever. So here are the dates of their empire up there. No test, just so you have some memory hook right there. Again, friends, the ruling family was Zoroastrian, and that was a form of the religion that goes all the way back to Cyrus the Great. It's a relatively tolerant kind of religion. It's essentially a chief deity, and you just nod your head to everybody else and say, if that works for you, fine. So they were not, they did not oppress people by and large because of their religious beliefs. It all had to do with politics. Or another way to put it, money. Okay, so for about 400 years, the Sasanians and the Romans and the Roman successors will go back and forth. Slow boil. Sometimes the pot goes over. My grandmother is proved true again. And sometimes it's just, well, okay. A little tense. All right, just one, this is one structure of all that was at that famous capital called Ctesiphon that has survived. And it was famous in the ancient world because of its arch. I'm not an architect, but I'm told, and I really believe it, because I'm not walking under it, that doing an arch like that's really difficult back then. And so they've got it propped up, but here was one of the main buildings that they have reconstructed from the ancient capital. This would be about 30 minutes or so south of Baghdad today. Okay, now here's a quote. Let's start with the heading, not so much the map. One of the Renaissance leaders of the empire, the Sasanian Empire, his name was Shapur. And he's called Shapur I because, as you can imagine, there'll be a second and a third, that kind of thing. And he had this phrase. It's a variation of what he inherited from the Persian Empire. Remember, Darius called himself the King of Kings? And here he used the phrase, I am the Lord of the empire of the Iranians, or the Aryans. And that was the way he depicted himself. So again, if you'll just look at the color, don't worry about the labels. You can see, so here's the Persian Gulf right here. Arabia, there's just the edge of the Mediterranean right there, the Caspian Sea. All of this area now is under the control of the Sasanians. Now just remember, friends, and I know you do, I could have showed you this area just a few centuries before. It would be all with the Greek control, right? Now it has come back, and it's the headquarters are over here at Ctesiphon, but this area right in here is the core of the Sasanian Empire. Okay, now here's Shapur the First. They modeled their way of thinking on the old Persian Empire. They saw themselves as a successor of it after years of having been beaten on by the Greeks and the Romans. And so this is near a tomb complex near Persepolis. They saw themselves, again, it's important to understand Iranian history, they saw themselves as the heir of that illustrious period from the past. Just remember the Shah of Iran, 2,500 years of monarchy, and I'm the culmination. They said, well, it's only been a few centuries, but we're the culmination. The reason I show you this to you, apropos of tensions off and on from this point on, the very first time a Roman emperor got captured in a fight was with the Parthians. There he is. Right there. His name was Valerian. This was in the middle of the 3rd century. And he lost a fight and got captured. Our sources are varied about what happened to him. And well, it's hard to know who to trust. You ever had that problem? No, I'm serious. It's kind of hard to know. But one of the stories that circulated around was he was kept alive for a number of years, and he followed Shapur around. Shapur loved to ride his horse, and every time he got on his horse, the Roman emperor got on his knees so he could step on his back to get on the horse. So he was a footstool. There's another story, and I actually don't believe it, but who knows, that Valerian had been captured for a while. He said, you know, I still got access to lots of sources if you let me go. Let me buy my freedom with some gold. And Shapur is reportedly said to his aide, go heat up a kettle, and he took a gold bar and got it into molten gold and made Valerian open his mouth, and he poured it down there and killed him with molten gold. That's a different way to kind of buy your freedom, isn't it? You know, one picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it? Okay, here's one of his gold coins. I was kind of joking with you earlier that when they first started the coins, they didn't put anything on the back. Well, that's unused space. I mean, you got to fill it in, right? So here's Shapur right there. By the way, I love the headdress. That's so impressive. And here's one of the sacred fire there of the Zoroastrians, right there. Beautiful coin, isn't it? Solid gold. Okay, now, I want to summarize a few things quickly for you, friends. I'm watching the time because I want to make sure we've got enough time at the end of a busy morning to get settled in with the rise of Islam. So important, one of the top 5 most important things in all of world history, just in terms of influence. So there were quite a number of crises in the mid part of the 3rd century of our common era in the Roman Empire. Remember I showed you one picture a few slides ago. They were all the way over here. Now the tribes over here, the Gallic Empire, taking over. You've got some up here, the Germans. Armenia, right here. A queen from Palmyra said, I'm going to take over Egypt. I just feel lucky today. And she came over here for a while and took over. So here's the Sassanid Empire. right there, and Rome is pulled back. It was in danger of collapsing. They had drought, they had disease. It was a time, for example, of persecution of minorities, including Christians, because the Romans had to have, you got to have somebody to blame. If you've got a drought, whose fault is it? If you've got some diseases going through, whose fault is it? Well, it's the minorities and the Christians. So I'm not trying to be facetious. They received very difficult treatment. It was this month, I think it was 258. In any case, before Valerian got captured, the leader of the church in Rome, the Pope, was holding a service with his deacons, and Valerian soldiers walked in and said, "You're the cause of a lot of problems," and took them outside and killed them all right there on the square in Rome. One of the early Christian martyrs right there in the middle of the century. It could have all collapsed. They kind of held on. They divided parts of the empire. By that I mean the generals and the leaders. Okay. Now, the red is supposed to be all the same color. This is an overlay of Google Maps. So the underlying color messes with to try to have a uniform color code. You understand my point? So all of this right here should be the same color. So one of these astounding things, the Roman Empire kind of holds on. Early in the 4th century, a very able and ambitious, two things, it's interesting if they go together. Very able, very ambitious, a man by the name of Constantine. He was able to unify the empire, to defeat his rivals. I'm telling you some elements that many of you will know, so I'm going to do them quite quickly. He was getting ready to have a decisive battle. As the story goes, he had a dream. Under this sign you will conquer, and he saw a sign of the Christian cross. He won the battle, and so he became a supporter of the early Christian movement. Now, a lot of things can be said about Constantine. He was a very strong supporter of the church, but as many of you will know, he held off getting baptized till the day before he died, because he was worried about what might happen if he got baptized and then he committed a sin, which he knew was going to happen. So he waited. But he was a great supporter of the church, and in one of the great surprising changes in all of world history, he enabled the Christians to come out and to establish themselves even more forcefully in public. In many places they had already done that. And it would not be till the end of that century that Christianity would become the official religion, and it did, of the Roman Empire. One of the things that Constantine did was to move the capital from Rome over here to a place right there. It took his name. Imagine that. It was a city called Byzantium. Been there a long time. It's right there on that narrow pass between Europe and Asia into the Black Sea. And so Byzantium became Constantinople. And you'll know it today as Istanbul. And it's one of the great cities in the world. Just as a kind of relaxed mind. How many of you have been to Istanbul? Thank you. Isn't it a great city? One of the fabulous city, one of the great places to stick 15 million people. It has history, it has culture, and the food. Really good. You should all go. So, the outgrowth of the Roman Empire becomes what's known in shorthand in historical sources that you've all read as the Byzantine Empire. So that's the term that we will use. But the dynamics that we have talked about for the last hour and a half You're probably already tired of them, and you still got a ways to go because it's the same dynamics. The people over here in the east, they don't want encroachment. They'd like to control some more things here, and so there will be difficulties, sometimes fighting, sometimes not fighting. It looks like, in some sense, a stalemate, but in terms of the development of culture and history, from Constantine until the Muslim takeover, to which I'm coming pretty quickly, Islamic wave, a number of very important things took place. For example, anybody here from Louisiana? There you go. Okay, you remember some of the ways that they do from the old Napoleonic Code in southern Louisiana, which they inherited from the Justinian Code in the Byzantine Empire. The Justinian Code was widely used in Europe and so forth, from the famous Emperor Justinian, some of the great building projects, some of the best-known churches like the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul today, or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, were all built during this period. And there literally would be a church on every corner by the middle of the 6th century. Very famous examples of architecture and so forth. So quite a turnaround from a very sickly, ingrown empire from the mid-3rd century. So you got a couple of centuries here of this expanse. Now, what was the language of the Byzantine Empire, friends? Do you remember? I haven't asked the question for a while, so let's see if you're awake. It was Greek. It was Greek. You sometimes wonder, so how long do certain influences last? When Alexander the Great sent his forces to the east, one of the things he did is he took along philosophers and scientists and people like that, and he would plant them. And so as the Hellenistic Empire took over for a couple of centuries and so forth, then Greek became a kind of common language. So if you were to go anywhere around here for basic communication, it would be Greek. It was one of the lasting gifts from the Hellenistic Empire. Okay, let me just see. Yes, indeed, I'm on track. Several bullet points. I won't read them to you, but that pattern of the slow boil, sometimes they get along, sometimes my grandmother's proverb is true, they get to fighting. So in the year 602 CE, the Sasanians decided, we've had enough of the Byzantine influence on our borders. And they felt called to start moving to the west. So, they're going to be right here. Sorry, excuse me, friends, hit the wrong button. From right here, they're going to start going in this direction right here, and this direction right there. And so for about 25 years, they get to fighting. The Byzantine Empire's eastern border, it cracked, it retreated, but it did not completely fall. I will say this, so the Sasanians came in, particularly in the year 614, they were headed on their way to Egypt. So the famous churches in Jerusalem, they all got destroyed as part of the scorched earth policies. And those 25 years of struggle between the Sasanian Empire and the eastern edge of the Byzantine made everybody exhausted and poor and depressed, but they were still fighting. Okay, so again, friends, note the color and the scheme here. For a while, it looked like the Sasanians had the upper hand. So here, they've expanded a little bit this way. These multicolor stripes right here are where They had sympathizers. They were trying to take over. They couldn't quite get it done, but they'd caused a lot of trouble. But they were able to get down into Egypt like this. Finally, the Byzantines were able to counterattack and force them to go back after about 25 years of fighting. And one of the reasons I like this map, and I realize we're coming to an end and you're tired, but just can you hang on with me about another 10 minutes?
Yes.
Look at this empty area right there. I like the way the map does it. While these two guys are duking it out, expending their capital and their resources, young man down here from a town called Mecca, you know where I'm going. He was an orphan, was raised in the caravan trade, married his boss. She proposed marriage to him. He had mystical experiences. I don't doubt them. I'm not arguing against them. So what looks like, like nothing's happening down there. Muhammad was born in the year 570. When he was 40 years old, he had a profound experience. Gathered some disciples around him, got into a bit of trouble with the changes he was suggesting because he believed in a combination of public life and religious practices. He didn't want to divorce government from religious practice. He wanted a whole of life approach. And so in the year 610, he had this experience. In the year 622, all while this fighting is going on, he had to flee Mecca to go to a city about 200 miles to the north called Medina. And there his community began to grow. One thing after another fell into place for him. Okay, I'm going to spend about 5 or 6 minutes on this map and a couple of things, and we'll be done. We'll have time then for questions and corrections. Okay, so let's do the color code again, friends. Right down here, there is Mecca. There is Medina. Muhammad dies in the year 632. He was born about the year 570. At the time of his death, the tribal forces that he controlled also had sway over much of the Arabian Peninsula. There were agreements of various kinds in place. Now, remember up here, since the color code has changed, the Parthians were here and the Byzantines were over here, and they'd been fighting for 25 years, right, friends? That's the reason I spent that 2 or 3 minutes trying to hammer that point home. They were tired. When Muhammad died, a great wave of Arab tribesmen under his successors began to move out. So here's the color code for you. The death of Muhammad, this area right here under his control. Then in the next about 30 years, there's a series of leaders, and they're sometimes called the Rashidun leaders. There are 4 of them. They're this color right here. So this is it right here. So in 30 years' time, Arab tribesmen, and not that many of them initially, but they were great at building coalitions. They're going to come up this way right here. And one of the first places they're going to go is the Sasanian Empire, because they've got bureaucracy, they've got money, they've got history. They'll come right up through here. There's Kuwait. They come right up like this, and just in a few years after the death of Muhammad, they'll have a toehold right here, and then they'll start expanding over like this. So all the way in that direction, 30 years after Muhammad died. The Arab tribesmen, instead of going straight up like this in this direction, where so many of the wars have taken place, they decide to stay, and I don't mean this facetiously, they decided to stay on the camels and to follow a kind of culture they knew better, so they go across North Africa. So they take the top part of Egypt right here. And so again, in 30 years' time, this part and this lighter color right here are in the hands, and a lot of fighting. We can't ignore that. A lot of fighting. And then there'll be some splits that I'm coming to in just a moment, but in the next several decades, they'll continue to go all the way across North Africa, up here into Spain and Portugal, right here, and they start marching into Gaul, what is France today. And many of you will know the very famous battle at Tours, 732, where the Islamic forces were defeated and they withdrew back here into Spain. But friends, easily one of the top 5 most influential changes in all of world history takes place in this relatively short amount of time. Let's look at the map again one more time. From 622 to 750, it's a little over a year's time, all of this area right here is under the political control of the Islamic forces. The Byzantine Empire is back here. There's Rome. It's still there, but it's quite smaller. You can imagine what comes next. You have Arab tribes who have military and now some political control over a vast amount of territory. Who do they choose to keep running things? You have to go to the smartest people in the group that you have taken over. So all of the leading officials in parts of the Byzantine Empire that were taken over, parts of Egypt that were taken over, parts of the Sasanian Empire that were taken over, they all become now officials in this new era. So that's the first point. You know, Arab tribes are not going to be able to populate and control everything. They have to have partners. The second thing is, once the wave has taken over, it will be centuries of development, of transformation. It's not an overnight thing where a religion and a political system and so forth change. It gets into place, and it will take centuries to develop. I'll give you some of those centuries next week. So a couple more comments, and we're going to stop. You've heard the term Sunni, which means tradition. That's the primary form of Islam today. So early on, one of an early division among the Islamic forces, I wish we had more time, but just enough to set the stage here. So here's Muhammad, dies 632. This man named Abu Bakr succeeds him. He was a close contemporary. He's succeeded by a fellow by the name of Omar, a name you will recognize, still used today. Another one called Uthman right here. And then the fourth caliph or leader was Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. His name is Ali, A-L-I. Isn't that a great name, Carolyn? That is a great name. And there were a number of people who believed. I want to try to be as fair as I can, and no jokes. A number of people at that time who believed that the cousin and son-in-law named Ali should have been the successor of Muhammad. But they did not take place. And that disagreement, which, and my grandmother's proverb came in spades here, they got to fighting internally about this. And so a number of people believed that Islam would be more rightly guided, that's the term that they like to use, rightly guided, had it gone from Muhammad to Ali, who was there for a brief period of time, and then to his descendants. So one of the differences, put it in kind of a nutshell, friends, the Shia have always believed that Islam is best governed, its health is best protected by somebody who is a descendant of Muhammad and Ali. They like the bloodline. And the Sunnis have always said, no, it's the consensus of the community on various things, not the bloodline, even though they revere the bloodline. It's not the most important thing. So, again, no jokes. Lots of fighting, infighting, along with all this success militarily. There's still a lot of infighting. Ali was assassinated. His son, who would have been the next one in the line, was assassinated. There were a series of leaders that came from that line, and they were revered by a title. You will all know it, because it's used differently by different groups. But for the Shia, the term Imam. Raise your hand, you've heard the term. I still got you. Thank you. Thank you. So what marks Shia Islam out in particular is they believe in these rightly guided imams. And sometimes it's words very hard for me to pronounce in English, the imamate. They believe in the governing authority of this line of people from Muhammad and Ali. And this term that I used at the beginning of the presentation called the Twelvers, they believe that there have been 12 of these supernaturally guided figures. The 12th one, and this is a really hard concept to get around, I'll just say it. The Shia understanding is that the 12th Imam from the 9th century has been hidden away by Allah to come back to set things right at the end of times. And they do believe that the force of that 12th Imam guides their leaders. So the highest leaders are the Ayatollahs, which means sign of Allah. Now that's a bit different from the Sunnis. So part of what makes Iran, Iran, and not Saudi Arabia is they have Ayatollahs. And Saudi Arabia has a king. It's not a complaint, it's an observation, but that just shows you how things have gone differently. Okay, I'll show you a couple of slides right here. I'm not sure you can read that. So what this says at the top, that says Islam. A line comes down here, it says Shia, and this says Sunni, and there was another group called Ibadi, which is historically very early. It only exists in a couple small places, and Tom, I'll just tell you this. How many of you heard of the Gulf of Oman and the country called Oman? Well, all of you have. They are Ibadi, and almost nobody else is. And they're very happy. They're very happy. They don't attack anybody. So if you were to go down this, and we won't, in any detail, a number of different kind of groups. Think of these, if it helps you, being Western people, denominations. If that helps you, think of it that way. Within the Shia movement, there are different groups, and here's the 12er, which is the largest group, and that is Iran. And here are the different denominations of the Sunnis. And you're going to say, thank you, Andy, for not going over all of those. I'll say a few more things about them next week, but not many. Okay, here we go. So if we were to fast forward today, through those centuries, lots of water under the bridge, and I'll cover a little bit of that water before we get to the 20th century next week. So there is Iran today. Follow the colors. Everybody with me? Follow the colors. So the headquarters, or the homeland of Shia Islam, is right there. There's some in the center of Afghanistan. The bottom half of Iraq right here, and it gives the majority population of Iraq a Shiite coloring. And then right down here, there's Yemen. It's just like we're reading the headlines, isn't it? So the connections between Iran and Yemen, you'll know the term, it's a pretty recent term that's used, the Houthis, or the Houthis. Has to do with a leader from just a few decades ago. But they are a form of Shiite. And you have it also over here, but you can't see it, in Lebanon, right there. And so the Hezbollah, which is the Shiite militia in Lebanon. The Houthis are some of the leaders of the Shiite militia there, and the Islamic Republican Guard over here in Iran are connected in a variety of ways. Now, that's not a bad way of putting it after kind of skipping over 1,000 years, wasn't it? I will show a few more things next week. Okay, if you want to look at it in a different way, it's an easier map right here. So there is Iran. This has to do with percentages. So about 60% of Iraq is Shiite because of the population down here. There's Yemen. So there's Lebanon right there. And other place with the majority of the Shiite population is Bahrain, that little island there in the Persian Gulf. But, of course, there are not very many citizens of places like Qatar and Bahrain. But Bahrain is also Shiite. I bet you're tired. If you have a quick question or two, I'll be glad to entertain it. If you have a correction, I'll be glad to entertain that also. Thank you for coming. Let me just tell you, next week I'll do some more history. We want to get to that 20th century in the Shah, but I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the best architecture in Iran. I hope you like it. The pink mosque from Shiraz and things like that. So please come back.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.